Hello and welcome to part 3 of Pulling the Perfect Key in DaVinci Resolve with me, Ben Brownlee from Boris FX. And this is the current state of our composite. We pulled the primary key in part 1, we sorted out the first bit of spill suppression in part 2, and now in part 3 we're going to be looking at improving our hold in and hold out mats to clean up the areas on the side and also to clean up areas in our sword and shield which are currently picking up reflections and giving us these horrible little spots in the middle. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of our UI. We don't need that right now. So I'm just going to come over and turn my Open Effects overlay off. The next thing I'm going to do is come into Primatte Studio and go down to our inside and outside masks. Now our outside mask shape is what we're going to use to create garbage masks. So these are quick and dirty shapes that just cut out a lot of stuff that we don't want to worry about. So in this case I've got a green screen that falls off a lot towards the right hand side and has a big gap in it, and up till now I haven't bothered about it. Simply because I know when it comes to this stage, I'm going to use the outside mask to create a garbage shape. And I could either do a crop, and actually, having said I'm going to turn the Open Effects overlay off, I'm going to turn it on again just to show you that I can come in and use our crop interactively on the viewer. So that's working there. I'm going to turn this off again. I actually don't want to use the crop because I want to show you something else, and that is how we can use a Mocha mask instead. Now if I turn this to Mocha mask, all of our garbage pops back up again. So if I come down and hit launch Mocha, this is going to pop me into the Mocha Continuum interface. And let's just play this back. So if you haven't used Mocha before, Mocha is a masking and motion tracking program that is found in Pixel Chooser across the entire Continuum range. You'll also find a version of Mocha bundled in Sapphire plugins, in After Effects, and also a Pro version called Mocha Pro that plugs in to a lot of other different hosts. But we're really only going to use it for a couple of very limited things within Primatte. And the first thing we're going to do is use it to create a garbage mask. So I can come up to my toolbar up here and I can either choose some of the primitive shape, so an ellipse or a square, or I can draw my own shape using an X-spline. So I can just click and drag points along the area that I want here, and I'll right click to close that shape up. Or if I'm not a big fan of drawing points and I just want to create a quick garbage mask, what I can do is I can use the area brush. And the area brush works a bit like a Photoshop paintbrush. So I can just click, drag on this, paint over the area I want to either keep out or remove. And when I'm done with that, I just turn off the quick mask and that will turn it into a spline for me. And I'm just going to scrub through here to make sure that it fits in all of the area that I'm after. And it looks like it does. That looks fine. And if I have my layer selected, you can see all the spline points in there. Now, these spline points can still be moved around or deleted just using the delete key if I think there are too many of them. But we're not going to be punished at this stage for having a slightly too complicated shape. It's going to be absolutely fine. Just one word of warning though, if you don't want to create an animated garbage mask, if you come down to the bottom right hand corner, there's a little button called the Uber key. If I turn the Uber key on, it means that if I come over to another frame and move these around, then this movement will affect the points across the entire image. So this is usually a safest way of creating up a quick garbage mask. Just by turning on the Uber key, you know your shape's going to be at the right size and not cutting off strands of hair like we were doing previously. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to save that out by either going Save Project or using the Save Project button in the top left-hand corner. And I'm going to go Exit, and that will apply straight away. The first thing it does is remove our actor from the scene. And that's because we need to tell Primatte to invert our outside mask. There it is. So I hit invert outside mask and that looks proper for us. I can also feather this, but with a garbage mask like this, feathering isn't going to help us and it's just going to slow down some of the processing. So we use the outside mask to hold elements out. So remove elements that are not going to be affected by the key. They're always going to be transparent, regardless of what the key is doing. The other way of doing this is to use an inside mask. And if I do inside mask, Mocha mask, and do a similar sort of thing, I'm going to launch Mocha. I can use Mocha in this case to actually create up a mask shape of areas I want to be 100% opaque. So I want to hold them in, again, regardless of what else the keyer is doing. And that's going to be really useful for both the shield that's got a color that's being affected by the keyer, and it's also going to be useful for our reflection just here. Let's start with the shield then. I'm going to give you a couple of keyboard shortcuts for Mocha. I'm a big fan of keyboard shortcuts, but I'm not a big fan of flooding people with keyboard shortcuts right from the get-go. But these are two of the most useful ones you'll want. We have X. If I click and hold down the X key, I can then pan the viewer around so I can see other bits. And I have Z. And if I press and hold down Z, I can zoom in and out of my viewer just by clicking and dragging with the mouse, or in this case, with the Wacom tablet. So this is going to let me focus on my shield. And at this point, I can either draw up a spline or use the quick mask tool again to come in and help us out with the shield. And I'm going to do just that. I'm going to just come in and paint a little bit over the quick mask of an area that's causing us a bit of problem, which is the lion here. But also I'm clicking and creating an area that's going to be nice to track. Because if we take a playback, we can see that our shield is going to be moving. Okay, let's take us back to our frame that we painted on, which is frame 100. Okay, so up in the layers controls over in the top left hand side, I'm going to just double click on layer 1 and call this one shield. It's always good to get into the habit of labeling up your layers. And I'm going to track this in because I don't want to add any manual keyframes unless absolutely necessary. And it's worth noting that I'm in the Essentials workspace at the moment. And I find the Essentials workspace does everything that I really need it to within Primatte. If I feel the need to do something I can't do in Essentials, I'll pop into Classic and we get a lot more controls that generally speaking aren't going to be necessary for the stuff that we're doing right now. So in Essentials mode, with our layer selected, we get to choose what we're going to be tracking in. We can track in just translation, or translation scale, translation scale and rotation, and skew, or perspective as well. And these are additive, so if I only want to track in translation and scale, it's always going to track in translation and scale. If I want to track in skew as well, it's always going to track in translation, scale, rotation, and skew. You can see how that's working. But we're going to take perspective because I want to get that 2.5D movement as the shield goes round. And I'm going to now track that forwards. And Mocha's going to have a think, and it's going to start tracking that shape in. Now, Mocha is a planar tracker, and it works in a different way than the trackers that are native to Resolve. Because Mocha is looking at this texture here. It's not looking at individual points, it's looking at the texture and how the texture moves. This gives us a nice robust result. Even as the shield moves, we get a bit of motion blur, or it just goes a little bit out of focus, as it does at the start here. So now if I play that back, we've got a mask that goes over the top of our shield and is looking very nice and very solid. I'm happy with that. But we've got another thing. And the other thing we've got is our sword. I'm going to press and hold down X and just pan along here. So if we have a look at our sword, we can see it's picking up reflections of the green at various points and on various sides. And because of the way the sword is moving, this isn't going to be as straightforward a job as it was with the shield. So let's have a look at a couple of things that we can do to make this a bit easier. Now, first things first, I'm going to come up to my shield in the layers controls, lock that, turn off the processing cog so it doesn't track anymore, and I'll keep visibility on. I'm happy with that. I'm also going to use my X-spline tool to come in and draw a shape around my sword. Now, I don't have to be too sort of detailed with how the sword is looking at this point, because Mocha's planar tracker works a little bit better when it's got some areas of detail to look at. And there's not a lot of areas of detail on the sword face, so giving it just a little bit of the border is going to help it to get the tracking in. And I'll double click on that layer and I will call this one sword. And coming down, I'll try my luck with perspective and see how far it gets me. And let's track that forwards. Now, I'm not expecting this to be 100% perfect track. And for this detailed shape, that's not even what I need. But it's looking pretty good so far. Let's come into back to our start frame and track that backwards. And a few seconds later, that is done. So now we've got our track in here. I can now come in and start to tighten up this shape a little bit. And before I do anything else, the first thing I need to do is come down to the bottom right hand corner and make sure that this is set to A for automatic keyframe insertion, auto key. If we've been playing around with the Uber key and we start to adjust these points, that's not going to give us the animation that we need. So make sure that's set to A. Alright, so now I can come in and zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to move my points around just so we keep in the areas of reflection that we want to keep, but not so much that we're getting any of the background screen. I'm also going to show you another little tip here. If we come up to the view menu and go to stabilize, this is going to stabilize our viewer based on the tracking. So this is going to help us out a little bit. And I'm going to come to my start keyframe, which was frame 110, and I'm going to tighten up this as well, because you remember how we started off with a little bit of extra space around all of our shape. Well, I don't want that anymore. So I'm going to tighten that up and again keep in that area for the reflection. And now I can just scrub this through and take a look and judge where I need to add any more keyframes. So this frame here, I might want to just tweak this just a little bit to get in a little bit more of the sword edge here. And that's looking pretty nice. Is this all sword edge? Maybe. Let's have a little look. Probably not. So let's tighten this in a little bit. Same at the top there. And check out the animation. Yeah, that's looking nice and natural. And I don't want to add too many keyframes, because too many keyframes could start to give the game away if things start to flap about a little bit too much. So that is probably going to do us. That's looking quite nice. And once we're finished with that, I'm going to go back up to the view menu, turn off stabilize, and then play that through. And that's looking pretty good. Now, doing masks like this is a skill that is worth practicing and worth learning, especially if you're quite new to this sort of work and haven't done a lot of mask creation before. If you're having trouble with a specific shot and you do know someone who's really good with Mocha, you can actually ask them to export out a project, and you can just merge that project in with your own here. But I'm happy with how that's looking. I'm going to save. I'm going to exit. Let's turn my Open Effects overlay back on, take a look at my final matte, and see if I need to add in anything else here. If we're still getting another couple of gaps, I might be tempted at this point just to clean up a little bit more of the foreground, always making sure that we're not adding in too much more stuff into the hair when we're trying to add in detail there. So you can see I added a little detail into the hand, but the hair popped up a little bit more. So if we look at the final composite, I actually still think that's doing a decent enough job. If it wasn't and it was causing me an issue, I can just undo that and then take us back to where we were before. Let's turn my open effects off again and play that back one more time. I think my hold in and hold out masks are doing a pretty good job for what they need to do. One of the things that I'm asked about at this point is why we're not seeing, if I zoom in a little bit, why we're not seeing any green shining through here, even though we're holding that in. And the simple reason for that is because we have our spill suppressor helping to do some of that job. Let's find an area where we've got the reflection coming in. Yeah, see the reflection happening all the way there because we've got that spill suppressor sorting us out. That's looking really nice still. So now we've got our matte pretty much sorted out. I'm going to work on the next part that's going to make this composite look right, and that is color correction. So please join me in part 4 of Pulling the Perfect Key in DaVinci Resolve, where we start to do the primary match of our foreground and our background plates. If you're enjoying it so far, please remember to hit the like button before you watch the next video. You can also subscribe for more videos by hitting the big button there. If you've got any comments, questions, or you just want to tell a terrible joke, then leave that in the comments section. If you want to follow along with this, use the download link in the description.